Reading from Genesis chapter 46 to onwards. And God spake to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will assuredly bring you up again, and Joseph will close your eyes. Jacob is inquiring of the God of his father Isaac. He is embarking on an important journey to keep his family alive through a time of famine, as Abraham and Isaac did before him. He also longs to see his favorite son alive. At the same time, he was apprehensive about the journey. Jacob had hastily packed his belongings and gathered his family and begun this long journey to Egypt, just as Joseph had instructed his sons. But when he had gotten as far as Beersheba, Jacob seemed to feel the full impact of what he was setting out to do. Now, Beersheba was a place rich in history of his forefathers. Abraham had called upon the name of the Lord here in chapter 21, verse 33. We read about that. And he had settled in this place after offering up Isaac on Mount Moriah. Chapter 22, verse 19. Here at Beersheba, Isaac had been visited by God, and the covenant made with Abraham was reiterated in chapter 26, verses 23 to 25. Now, this place is considered the southern boundary of the promised land. We read in Judges, from Dan to Beersheba. That's a phrase used to describe the land of Canaan. Now, when he was about to cross it, he wanted to be sure that it is in God's will. Moreover, many years back, when there was severe famine in the land, his grandfather Abraham traveled to Egypt, deceiving Pharaoh about his wife Sarah and getting them into trouble. When there was another famine during the time of his father Isaac, the Lord appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I shall tell you. Live for a time in this land. I will bless you. I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give this land, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. So Jacob very rightly wanted to be sure to leave that place. He knew that he was only a clan of only 72 people, few people. But they're all together now. On one side, he would like to see Joseph, and on the other hand, he has learned from his experience that if you go without asking God, you can run into great problems. He has learned to ask God before he makes plan, even though those plans seem right. He has learned to put God's will first, even before his beloved Joseph. With age should come wisdom, the wisdom to know that only one thing is needed, doing the will of God. Jacob allowed nothing to come between him and his God, not even paternal love. The promise of God was his greatest treasure, as always. He was rewarded with the vision of God and the clear guidance of God. The Lord is appearing to Jacob to address these concerns. When we set aside our own will and are determined to do the will of God, he will show us his will. The same God who said to Isaac, do not go down to Egypt, is saying to his son, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. We should be willing to take no or yes from God at all times. Our circumstances or our place of stay may change as the time goes by. But there is an unchanging promise for the one who wants to do the will of God, whether in Canaan or in Egypt. The promise is, I will be with you and bless you, or I will go down with you to Egypt. This is the confidence of a Christian. When Moses was about to start his journey to the land flowing with milk and honey, he had only one request. When the Lord said, my presence shall go with you and I will give you rest, Moses replied and said, if your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here. Moses was insistent that the presence of God be with them. In Isaiah 63, we read the words of the Lord, of the prophet saying, in all their distress, he's talking about God there, he was distressed. And the angel of his presence saved them. In his love and in his mercy, he redeemed them. And he lifted them and carried them all the days of old. Now, this is the same promise that Jesus had said to his disciples when he was about to ascend to heaven. Lo, I am with you till the end of the world. This hymn, Abide with Me, is a hymn written by Henry Francis Lyte. It's a prayer for God to stay with the author throughout life and death. It was written by him in 1847 while he was dying from tuberculosis. Let me read out those lyrics, very meaningful. I fear no foe, with thee at hand to bless. Ills have no weight and tears no bitterness. Where is death's sting? Where grave thy victory? I triumph still, if thou abide with me. Hold thou thy cross before my closing eyes. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning breaks and earth's vain shadows flee. In life, in death, O Lord, abide with me. This is the confidence of a Christian. In life and in death, his only prayer is, Lord, abide with me. And even as he makes some very important decisions in his life, this is the prayer. The promise to Jacob was not only that God will be with them, but he will multiply him there. This was a step towards the fulfillment of the promise first made to Abraham, that he would have seed like the stars of the sky, innumerable. God had chosen Egypt to be a safe place where his people could become numerous, safe from their enemies and nourished in plenty. He knew that it would deteriorate, but he also had his own plan, already announced to Abraham, that at the 400-year mark, his people would be on their way back to the promised land. God has his way of bringing his plans to pass. And we cannot predict how he does things. We can only accept them with confidence. Finally, God told Jacob also that he will bring him back to this land of promise. We know how difficult it would be to bring a whole family back after 400 years of staying in a foreign land. Yet after 18 years, when he was about to die, Jacob instructed Joseph to take his body back to Canaan. His heart was in Canaan, and he knew that God will fulfill his promise. Joseph was also sure of this happening. Many years later, when he was about to die, he gave the Israelites instructions to take his bones with them. During all those 400 years of their stay in Egypt, the bones of Joseph rested somewhere in Israelites' land in Egypt. A stark reminder that God is with them and will fulfill what he has promised to their forefathers. While they were slaves and were persecuted, this promise provided their identity and their destiny. We must remember who we are and where we are bound, or else we will give up the fight and merge with the people around us, worshipping what they worship. In the last part of this chapter, we see Joseph meeting his father. Around 22 years back, when Jacob saw the blood-stained coat of Joseph, he remarked, surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father wept for him. Genesis 37:35. But here he says, now let me die, since I have seen your face, that you are still alive. Mourning has turned into rejoicing. Hopelessness to true comfort. Jacob was ready to die then and there. But God still had 17 years of blessing in store for him. We cannot decide the time of our departure. Here also we see the tenderness with which Joseph embraces his father. The second in command of all Egypt is weeping before all others. All the bottled up emotions are now let go. There is a time to weep in our lives. Both Jacob and Joseph were conscious that this is a culmination of many events in their lives. And those tears were tears of release rather than of bitterness. Joseph is alive, not dead. And he is the Lord of Egypt, not a helpless slave. And he is mediating for Jacob's household, offering all his best resources. We must realize in our Christian walk, our mourning has been turned to joy. Our Lord has risen from the dead. He's alive and he's mediating for us today at the right hand of the Father. And our tears, not tears of bitterness, but tears of joy. Earlier, Joseph had said to them, you shall live in the land of Goshen and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. He says, when Pharaoh calls for you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants has been keepers of livestock since our youth, even until now. Both we and our fathers, so that you may live in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. Here we see Joseph carefully planning for their stay and wisely choosing Goshen. It was a place near to him, at the same time isolated from the culture of Egyptians, because shepherd is an abomination for the Egyptians. Here is a picture of our Lord, who in his intercessory prayer says, I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them away from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. Just as you send me into this world, I also send them into the world. You see, though he was the second most powerful person in Egypt, he knew that Egypt was not his home, and he wanted to protect his family from the influence of Egypt. So he wisely chose this place where many Egyptians won't come, because shepherd was an abomination for the Egyptians. At the same time, he could have fellowship with them. He could go and talk to them. And this attitude of Joseph is very real to that of ours as a Christian. No matter how we rise in this world, we should never lose sight of that reality that this is not our home. May the Lord give us that same clarity as we live in this world. God bless.